Hello everyone, and hello Toby.
Good evening, good afternoon, and after your scrambled eggs, good morning.
Good morning, indeed. Okay, so today we're looking at a few bits and pieces. It's another Sunday afternoon for us. I think Man U are playing Man City at the moment, but we're ignoring the football and we're getting on some.
It passed me by, I have to say.
Yeah, might grab a quick pint at the end of this recording and go and see what the score is.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, it works out nicely.
Stu's already eager to end this and go watch football. This is terrible. Anyway,
no, I'm being terribly professional.
I'm
sat here.
Always.
We don't have. I don't have the score in the background whilst.
No.
Whilst we're doing this, I've got my notes, my film-related notes, and that's all I'm working with.
Yeah.
So today we're going to continue to do a little bit more on Australian film. Have a little brief interjection on that one because you mentioned Gallipoli last week in relation to the Water Diviner.
Yeah, and I went to watch it again, which was a delight. So nice to talk about that.
Indeed, we got that, and then an idea that you sent to me the other day, wasn't it, to do a short section themed on the notion of film and breakfast.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it came from, but I've got just a few examples of that. Obviously, there are many breakfasts in many films, but I've just got 4 examples of
these your favourite breakfast-related films.
Yes, can you guess what they will be, listeners?
I'll say 2 of them do have breakfast
exactly.
in the title,
Yeah.
So people can ponder over that in the next few minutes until we get to that point. I'd admit it, say if you were to say name the first 2 films that have breakfast in the name, it would probably be these 2.
There.
So you probably have a good go if you want to try and guess it. Should we just go to see what you've been up to this week in the world of film? Any interesting things you've watched or points you want to pass on to the listeners?
A couple besides Gallipoli. I've seen one new freshly out film,
which is
Hot Tub Time Machine 2, which follows our talk the other week about sequels. We did
have a mention of Hot Tub Time Machine.
Oh, did we?
I think a very brief one. I can't quite remember what we were talking about. It has come up in previous.
I mean, it's only the second one. I think we went for just major franchises, didn't we?
But Hot Tub Time. Definitely not a major front. I mean, from what I gather, is it pretty much the same cast as the first one, minus John Cusack?
Yeah, he pops into it
he
very briefly.
Up his
I expect he
got
a little bit of cash, but stayed generally away from the project, which wasn't a bad choice. Were
you not? Was that because the film was terrible? Because from what I got, I read a few comments on Hot Tub Time Machine on IMDb last night after you sent this through to me, and a lot of the comments were. Regarding John Cusack, was that he was the best thing in the first one, and he's now not in the second one.
I really rate him as a presence and actor. He's good, isn't he? And he stayed out of this one. I was quite concerned going into this because I did actually like the first one, but it was also good because I couldn't quite remember what happened, and therefore the chronology wasn't going to affect me. And I have to say, in the first 10 minutes, I laughed at least 10 times, and
so a laugh a minute, quite literally.
It's very crass and very film referential, which doesn't usually sit very well with me. They're constantly referring to other films.
Oh right, so even as a film critic and large film watcher. Were you picking up on all the references, or did you just find it hard work?
No, they're just literally saying this is like what we're doing here is like that film Fringe or Looper.
Right, so it's not an intelligent reference particularly. Then more sort of straight-barreled. Look what we've just ripped off.
And so I have to say, probably it was maybe nervous tension. The reason why I was laughing so much. But there was one. Really funny thing where the young actor called Clark Duke, who's the son of an actor who I actually like. I didn't know his name before, but called Rob Corddry, and his father is this sort of over the top rock star character. They've changed the past by using the time machine. So they made loads of money and they've ripped off songs that they already knew and things like that. Both 2 of them have.
Wait a second, was that not done in Back to the Future part? Was it part 1 or part 2?
Where, I think they might even
where Michael J. Fox plays the Johnny B. Good track.
Oh, that's yeah. The bit they've extended that massively.
Oh right, okay.
Over 2 characters, and it remains quite fun. Oh yeah, so the son goes into there's a certain amount of substance abuse going on with his father, and when the son leaves, his mother says, "Who was that?" And I you need to sort of see these things really, but to enjoy them.
Okay, so was the film better than the first one?
No,
as good,
no.
worse?
What happened? It absolutely crashed after about
dear.
20-30 minutes. I just got
So
sick of it.
Is this
it was
90,
like cultural death.
Is this
actually.
a 90-minute film or?
I don't know because I don't know what happens at the end because I had to leave, and it's the first. Sorry, it's only the second film I've left in my entire life.
Wow! So it got that so bad.
I felt ill. I literally it was.
So was that just the jokes were really terrible, or the story was bad? Or just
crassness just oozed out of it, and I had to leave. It was the first film. The only other film I walked out was the Da Vinci Code, where it just irritated.
You didn't fall asleep
the
instead.
Heck out of me, and I just had to get out of the cinema. And so it happened with this film.
Okay.
So I would not touch this film with a.
Or would you advise watch the first 15 minutes and don't watch it anymore?
Yes.
So was it better than The Hangover?
Wait for the DVD and watch the first 10 minutes. And I thought it would make. I've never been to a drive-in. I thought it'd make a good sort of drive-in film where you could.
So you can watch the first 15 minutes, and then make out with your girlfriend, and miss the last half an hour.
Yeah, I've never been to. Have you ever been to a drive-in? I know it's more. I
don't even know if I've never even seen one in the UK. I'm sure there's probably the odd novel.
I wonder if there is. That's perhaps a subject for next week.
We'll have to maybe do a bit of research and we'll come back and see if there is a drive-in in the area.
Yeah.
If at all in the UK.
Yeah. I'd like to.
But I mean, it'd be amazing if there's even any left in the States, because it's something that was definitely around in the sort of 60s and 70s, back when cinemas, I guess, weren't air conditioned and stuff, and it's a bit nicer to sit outside.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're going to diverge.
I
think there's a couple other things you want to make, points you want to make. On what's going on. You sent me another note regarding. Did you watch Hugo this week, the 2011?
Yes,
film?
And that was. I mean, I'd watched it when it came out, and I'd actually forgotten that it was quite closely related to the early pioneering filmmaker Méliès, who is played in the film by. Oh goodness, what's his name? Ben Kingsley. Sir Ben Kingsley.
Actually, well, I will just interject. When I did have a look at Hugo's list, I mean, it's a proper heavyweight British cast in that film. So I looked down. We've got Sir Ben Kingsley, we've got Sir Christopher Lee, we've got Richard Griffiths, OBE, and Emily Mortimer, who herself isn't titled, but her father's Sir John Mortimer, QC. Barrister and also a screenwriter. He was the guy, right? He was just I'm going on a music divergence here.
I know you do like those.
I do like, but it was quite interesting. This guy, Sir John Mortimer, he started did his legal stuff, but really wanted to kind of be a dramatist.
Right.
And he was the guy that defended the Sex Pistols for having the word bollocks. He defended them against the obscenity laws in Nevermind for the album Nevermind the Bollocks, to allow them to have bollocks written on the front of their album cover back when it was released. And he did write one film, which was Tea with Mussolini, which starred Judi Dench, Maggie Smith, and quite absurdly Cher as well.
I never saw it, but it was from a few years ago.
I haven't seen it myself. Anyway, sorry. Back to
it looked quite
Hugo.
girly for me, but Méliès, who was just to recap, 1861 to 1938, and the one fact that I'll bring in, and it's quite a strange allegory, this film, but it definitely is about the spirit of Méliès. And there's one fact which I found interesting, because the character he's in the film is working in a toy shop, which in fact that's exactly what happened to him. He lost his film studio, and in a kind of Gaelic rage, which is related to what we were saying last week.
Is this the burning obsession with burning things?
He dug a big hole in his back garden and burnt his entire stock of film negatives, which it's amazing that something like 200 films still survive just from existing prints. But one little bit of information: his most famous film, A Trip to the Moon, or The Trip to the Moon, they didn't have a colour copy, because it was there were copies that were hand tinted, but they did find one in Spain a number of years ago, and I'll have to double check this, but they were restoring it, but it takes a long time, and I'm not sure they've even finished yet. But
so it's a work in progress. We may
see. What how much that bit better would the films have been if you'd have had the original negative. So that was that.
I mean, that's often the case. We had it.
Epitomised the sort of early cinema fragility of stock.
Yeah, well, we said we had it with Lewis Webber last week, didn't we? I mean, I guess it is just a notion. Back then, there were one or two copies of films, and if they got accidentally filed away incorrectly,
or they melted them down for the chemicals,
or even if they just obviously the nature of film, just a bit of too much light exposure, and that can be the end of your work potentially. Okay, so actually, just on reference then, Hugo, good film, worth going back to watching. I mean, I saw it won loads of awards for sound and visual back in 2011 when it came out. And
if you like cinema, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, and it's an interesting, like I say, it's an allegory, but it's not obvious, which is a nice thing to ponder as you're watching. And
I have a question, so I'll try and move on a bit. Did you watch Mary and Max in the end? Because I mentioned it last week.
I remember that I've actually seen it, and or at least some of it, and it wasn't quite my cup of tea for some reason. So I'll have to leave that with you. It was something a bit dark and a bit. Yes, it wasn't
not bright.
I really liked the one thing I did remember and I liked about it was the voice of the main character, which was done, I believe, by Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yep, the late Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah, and that was memorable.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, I've got one more thing we should do before we get onto our first block, which is. It is apparently, from what I read, the MTV Movie Awards, of which we discussed a few weeks ago now. They're on this very evening. So as a recap,
I haven't kept up quite up to date.
No.
I will
see what you can do. Basically, I've got a list in front of me of the nominees. I won't read them out because we're probably going to be pushed a bit for time to get through everything we want to get through today. So I'm just going to get Toby to call out who he thinks going to win knee-jerk reaction for reference, which we'll talk about it next week. So of the awards, I've got the main ones down. So who's going to win Movie of the Year?
American Sniper.
Who's going to win Best Male Performance?
Keep with the Coop.
Keep with the Coop. Okay. Best Female Performance?
My favourite, Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah. Breakthrough Performance?
What's that? Dylan O'Brien, yeah.
Dylan O'Brien. I think this is pretty consistent with a few weeks ago, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
You're doing well. Best Villain?
Oh, they haven't got my favourite one in there, have they?
No, we had that problem last time.
Oh, well, I'm not even going to comment then.
Okay, J.K. Simmons, I think you went for last time, if memory serves.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Best on-screen transformation? Is it Corral or is it Redmayne?
I think Crowe, yeah.
Yep, in Foxcatcher. And then the big one for the MTV Movie Awards, Best Shirtless Performance.
Yeah, the Chris Pratt, yeah.
Chris Pratt.
A terrible name, but, good body.
Okay, so we'll come back and we'll see how many of those Toby got right next week when we have a return on see what actually happened at the awards and how many Zac Efron won.
Yeah, go and stick your bet on that.
Okay, so should we move on to our first little mini section? So this was off the back of, so we were talking a bit about the Water Diviner.
Oh yeah,
last week, and you were commenting about Gallipoli, which was Mel Gibson's in it, isn't he?
Yes, the I'd say original. Perhaps has been the film Gallipoli from 1981 with a young sort of dashing looking Mel Gibson and a chap called Mark Lee who hasn't been in a huge amount of stuff since. Obviously, we all know about Mel Gibson, and I would probably say that was his breakthrough film. And I went back to see it because it was basically the same subject as the Water Diviner, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's by a very successful filmmaker, Peter Weir, who went on to do he did Picnic at Hanging Rock, which is quite a famous Australian film from 1975. More internationally, Dead Poets Society, which I expect you'll remember. Chaps standing on desks, You're My Captain and all that. Truman Show, and more recently, which brings us round to the Water Diviner, Master and Commander.
Oh, was that Russell
with
Crowe
Russell
in it
Crowe
as
in it,
well?
yeah.
Actually, one of the just out of interest, one of the girls that worked in our shop where I work was an extra on that film. I think they had her eating fake gruel for most of the day.
Oh, really?
for one of the scenes.
Where was that filmed then?
I've got no idea. This was years ago. I can't remember when Master Commander was.
2003.
Yeah. I don't know. Either way, she went down as an extra, and yeah, basically all she said is basically had her dressed in period clothes, kind of pretending to eat gruel for a few hours, basically. Anyway.
And yes, Gallipoli is basically a depiction of youth, mateship, as they call it in Australia, energy, good looks, and also the futility of war. It's a very powerful film. I actually saw it the first time when I was about 14 in the school canteen. Bizarrely. And
were there regular film screenings?
No, I think a teacher of some sort was trying to get a film club going. I remember having a little badge actually.
Yeah, right.
It didn't last
with
very
your name
long.
on, or just sort of
film club or whatever it was called. And I think it was one of the first films that I mean, I loved films even younger than that, but first films that I thought was really powerful. It was the first sort of modern film. So it was only a couple of years after it was brought out.
So is it a good alternative to the Water Diviner, or is it a good companion piece even to the Water Diviner?
A very good companion. I was thinking about the Water Diviner. We might be able to talk about this subject a bit more. Why it's again, it looked good, but not as good as Gallipoli. And I thought, what disappointed me in that? And I thought, I don't often see trailers, but I'd seen the trailer for that. It worked because it made me want to go and see it. But basically what the trailer did was tell you exactly what happened, left a tiny bit at the end, and the end bit wasn't very successfully portrayed and wasn't very fulfilling. So you knew what was... You ended up thinking, well, I knew all that.
Yeah, so it's a bad trailer, basically.
Bad trailer, and we can talk about that if we've got time.
I think maybe next week it could be, because I mean, we do have access via the likes of YouTube to pretty much watch all the film trailers of history, so it could be quite an interesting one. Good film trailers, bad film
listeners,
trailers.
Think of the best trailer, the ones that
did a good job at selling a film to you without ruining it by telling you what happened.
Exactly, Sue. Yeah.
Indeed. Okay, so I presume, Gallipoli, good film, worth watching.
Fab. Top 20 film.
So should we move on to your kind of feature pick for this week, which is films with the theme of breakfast.
Oh yes, right.
I don't know if our listeners have considered what those two breakfast named films might be, but shall I go with the first one, sort of a cult classic from 1985?
Indeed.
Which was The Breakfast Club,
of course, you had
starring
that one.
Emilio Estevez, Judd Nelson, Molly Ringwald, amongst others.
Yeah, and I don't think, it's been a few years since I've seen that, I don't think they actually have breakfast. It's just the fact that they start detention very early.
Yeah, I think it's the nature of the detention is referred to as the Breakfast Club. So.
Yeah, I think the nerdy guy brings a packed lunch and gets it out, and then the cool guy takes the mick out of him.
Something along. John Bender, the guy played by Judd Nelson, was it?
Who again? He didn't do a lot else.
So I think he went around the circuit on the sort of American kind of sort of prime time sort of shows kind of circuit. Although I was racking my brains on Emilio Estevez, because I mentioned to you the other day I watched Repo Man, which actually did the year before The Breakfast Club, which was quite a good B movie with Harry Dean Stanton. I racked my brains a bit, and then it came to me. He was it was a film when I was younger, the Mighty Ducks franchise of films. Right, it may have passed you by a bit. It was the mid-90s when I was quite young, so it was sort of on TV at about the right age to watch it, but it's sort of like about a kind of misfit bunch of young ice hockey players that are put together. And
I think I've seen that. Yes,
yeah, they did like three of them, I think, in total. Where you've kind of got this
ice hockey.
And he plays.
I was thinking Ducks, but
he plays Coach Gordon Bombay in it, and sort of gets together his sort of misfit bunch of ragtag.
Would you recommend that film?
It was for a kids' film, as for something to watch when you're sort of 7, 8 years old.
You've got quite a smile on your face.
Yeah, I mean, it has many happy, just the pure delight of all the cliches they go through in that film, where it's kind of like, the ragtag American team, and then you kind of in the end they end up playing like the Russian team in the second, who are all dressed in black. and slick back hair and yeah, everything. It's just sort of just delightful film cliche after delightful film cliche. But anyway, should we go back to the Breakfast Club?
Right, we'll dealt with the Breakfast Club, haven't we?
Well, do you want to? Okay, it's a very good. You said it's a very good film. I mean,
breakfast in the title.
It's got breakfast in the title. It's I mean, I don't know what. There's something about it. There's a particular kind of ambience about it that seems to pick up the kind of feeling of sort of 1980s high school America. Sort of has all of the kind of characters in it, and it's got a really, really nice feel to it.
I would agree. I was pretty young when it came out, and I saw it and thought it was a very cool film. I had a couple of bits, as usual in American films, where you think that's a bit naff, but I remember thinking the cool guy played by
Judd Nelson.
Judd Nelson. Yeah.
Oh, actually, I do have one thing to say on this. Actually, it's like one of the best drug taking scenes in the history of film is in The Breakfast Club, where Emilio Estevez sort of smokes a joint and then sort of starts doing cartwheels and backflips all the way around the school. It's actually precise representation of smoking weed would be.
Yeah.
Anyway, so next one, Breakfast. The second Breakfast titled film. Do you want to give us this one? 1961.
Breakfast at Tiffany's. There's been a pop song about it. It's classic. Audrey.
I've heard you really like that song, Toby.
Did I let slip that it's dreadful?
I remember you saying that the reason you hadn't watched Breakfast at Tiffany's was almost entirely because of your massive dislike for that song.
I'd let that slip, and that's absolutely true. The breakfast, there is a breakfast in this one in the first scene with
Audrey Hepburn
in stylish black and white, with Audrey Hepburn eating something like a Danish pastry and a coffee, looking into the window of the jewellery shop Tiffany's.
I want some of that expensive jewellery.
Yeah, with her immaculate hair and.
Are you going to watch it? Do you reckon? Are you ever going to get past your dislike for? That's I don't know who wrote it, but it's one of those sort of like mid-90s kind of Brit pop kind of going into indie kind of pieces.
Yeah.
And that's what
Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Okay,
it's horrible.
On that. Okay, right. Next one then. 1993. We're up to now. We've gone forward in time to 1993. Quite a big jump. One of Bill Murray's, one of his many great films. In fact, actually, probably one of my, if not my favourite Bill Murray film, which is Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Do you want to add a few bits onto that?
Yeah, I watched this on a plane to Greece, which was tremendous because I hadn't heard about it before it came on in the old days when you didn't have choices; it just kind of came up on a screen. In around the time it came out in '93, and it was an absolutely engaging way of forgetting that you're in a metal tube at 34,000 feet or whatever. Completely taken with the story, and there is a breakfast scene. It's about 3 or 4 days after he realises that there's something weird going on and he's kind of immortal, and he's stuffing his face and he's pouring coffee from the jug, and he says, "Yeah, keep it coming," and to the dismay of what's her name?
Andy McDowell's character, whoever she plays.
And then it's smoking, and she's going, "Well, aren't you worried about anything?" And he's just got to the point of 3 or 4 days in. He's just like, "No, I've got nothing to worry about."
It is a great kind of the narrative like function across it, like the way Bill Murray portrays that sort of character who you just sort of goes through all of those sort of stages of it being great, it being terrible, trying to kill himself, and then like learning to play the piano amazingly, ice sculptures and
irritation to desperation to appreciation.
Indeed.
And to making the best of it.
Indeed, it sort of goes. I mean, and he portrays that kind of transition between all of those different emotions. And I mean, he obviously has a kind of slightly kind of twee kind of how does he stop this continual time paradox kind of keep on going, but obviously don't want to go into it to spoil it slightly, although it may be seen to be coming. I
suppose
guess
it's old enough not to worry about plot spoiling.
Well, yeah, but it's one of those pleasant to watch all the way through.
Yeah, I like him. I did go back to watch this actually to do this part of the recording, and I particularly liked, as I did at the time, the bit where he finds out that this old guy dies on that day that he's repeating.
Yeah.
And he tries his best to sort of feed him up and to keep him alive, and it's quite moving.
It's really. I mean, there's loads of very, very good scenes. I mean, I like the bit with like the guy who he keeps meeting across the other side of the road, who he detests, and which is brilliant. And then the bit where he learns all the answers to the Jeopardy quiz show, and he sort of sat with all the old people like answering the questions before they're even being asked.
And then when he tries to kill the groundhog,
and
the groundhog's like driving on the steering wheel, going.
It's just a brilliant film. It's I mean, if no one, if for some reason someone hasn't watched it out there, then you have to. It's kind of one of those great films. And should we move on to the last one of just sort of your 4 breakfast themed picks? Actually, did we get why Groundhog Day fits into the breakfast? Is it just because he wakes up every morning and has breakfast?
No, he has that breakfast.
It is that breakfast,
with huge amounts of cakes and stuff.
Okay.
And it's one of the memorable scenes.
Okay.
For me.
So going back in time a little bit, 1987, again one of the all-time classic films. I think many people's probably in their top 5
top
films
3
of all
for
time.
Me.
It's again another film which if you haven't watched, it needs to be watched. Which is With Nell and I.
Yeah.
Which do you want to add? I mean, it's one of those things. It's one of those things where you just say to people, you need to watch. I mean, there's in terms of its kind of quote for quote ratio to time within that film, it's got to have quite possibly one of the high, along with Spinal Tap, which is also unbelievably high on quotability count. I mean, With Nell and I, scenes, quotable lines.
That'd be a good double bill, wouldn't it? That'd be a good drive-in double bill, yeah.
With Nell.
Yeah.
Which would you put first?
With Nell and I but only just, I think.
You'd have. Oh, in terms of if you were putting the double bill on, would you go With Nell and I first, and then I'd probably go Spinal Tap first.
Yeah.
Or maybe get the laughs in and then go for the dry wit.
Yeah, ending in the Hamlet speech.
With Richard E. Grant staring in the rain with his umbrella up. So I mean, do you want anything more to that? I mean, we could just talk through basically every scene is brilliant in that film.
The first scene is breakfast with McCann in a cafe and the egg yolk coming out of the sandwich. The woman, he's getting a bit desperate, and he goes back to the flat with Nell, knowing that he's got some problems, and with Nell is rubbing himself with deep heat and demanding he has some booze, and then ends up finding some lighter fluid and drinking that. So that is the breakfast. So we go from cake to lighter fluid.
Yep, and there's numerous other kind of brilliant meal related scenes in there. We have the bit with the chicken, the scene with the chicken where they've just sort of sit it up in the oven after sort of not being able to prepare it correctly. Hair here, yeah. And then we've got the tea room scene as well, which actually for listeners, Toby and. Special contributor Tobias and
a famous actor called Tobias Bourne.
Did a reimagining of the tea room scene.
Unfortunately, I sort of cracked up a little bit because I was enjoying his performance halfway through. So forgive me for that.
Indeed, but we'll stick it on at the end of this of this recording because he doesn't want to go to waste. It's a nice piece put together, so we'll put it in. I do have a bit of a quiz question for you regarding With Nell and I. Which I was looking up, I found really interesting. They had an auction back in I think the year 2000 where they were auctioning off With Nell and I bits and pieces from the film.
Yeah, I remember they were trying to sell the house as well.
I don't know if it was a charity thing or not. I can't quite remember. But the question I have for you is that I think it was Radio 1 or radio DJ Chris Evans purchased the original overcoat worn by Richard E. Grant.
Yes, I do know this actually, but I don't know.
So do you know how much he paid for it? That's the question. How much would you pay for Richard E. Grant's overcoat?
Can you give me a leeway amount?
It's single digit thousands.
Right. So between
1 and 9,000.
Right.
He paid. But I said, I was looking at this thing. That's a good piece of film memorability to purchase because this film isn't going to get worse in time. It's
7.
Stick it up.
7.
7,000. That's pretty close. He paid 6,000 for it, which
Yeah.
I personally think was quite a good investment. I'd happily.
But you wrecked it. Did you hear that?
No. What happens?
He was on one of those 4-wheel drive things.
What, wearing Richard E. Grant's
yes,
overcoat
yes,
from
and it got caught in the wheels. Yeah, so there's another bit
terrible.
of trivia.
Oh, it's terrible. Oh well, I should have bought it then. I'd have had it nicely tucked away for future use.
Okay, well I've got a more boring pub quiz question for you.
Go on.
Which multi-Oscar-winning British actor went up for the role of Withnail?
Oh right, so
what's the phrase when you go and
casting? He went to the casting call. Or whatever it was. So basically, the guy who didn't get it when Richard E. Grant did.
Famous actor.
So what's this? 1987. So famous in 1987, or famous now and was unknown in 87.
Yeah, he was just about up there.
Same sort of age.
Yeah, he's currently 57.
He's currently 57.
Yeah, I happen to know that off the top of my head. Yeah.
I don't know.
There were two famous ones that went up. Unfortunately, the other one, which I was surprised about, hasn't won an Oscar, which I'm surprised. But anyway,
so we've got an Oscar-winning British actor.
Oscar-winning British actor.
I don't. 57. Can you give me another? It's not Ralph Fiennes, is it?
No.
It's about the right kind of age, and he's won an Oscar.
Sort of social kind of scale.
Okay, so we're talking about very classy. We're running out of time, so I'm not going to beat around the bush or ask for clues. If you just give us,
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis. Oh, I'd be very intrigued to have seen him do that. Actually,
yeah.
I know you're not a particularly big fan of Daniel Day-Lewis.
No, I would have. He would have done I reckon he could have done it.
I think he'd have done Alcoholic quite well.
Yeah,
actually.
Also, Kenneth Branagh went up for it.
Kenneth Branagh.
It would have been a nice.
You've got the thespian angle, definitely.
It would have been a nice quiz question if I go. They both won Oscars, but I'm surprised.
Branagh hasn't picked it up.
Won plenty of BAFTAs.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I guess it might have offset quite badly with the Richard Griffiths. I mean, having Branagh, who was also a very established thespian at that point.
I can't imagine
the kind of Uncle Monty Kenneth Branagh combination. I don't know would have quite worked well. Anyway, we've gone past the half hour. I will just quickly ask you. Should we just go with the line of basically all the films we've mentioned, not including Hot Tub Time Machine 2,
yes, please don't
are good ones to watch over the next week?
Oh, I'm looking forward to watching John Wick. Yeah,
John Wick. Okay, is that next week?
It's a revenge story. Talking about what we were talking about last week about the revenge story with The Last Night, which was pretty dreadful. This looks like a corker, and so I'm looking forward to that.
So we might get a bit of comment on that from you next week.
I would like to see that.
That sounds good. So I think we'll say bye now, and after this we will play out with Bias and Toby's recreation of the tea room scene from Withnail and I. Yes. So goodbye everyone.
Cheerio and good night.
All right, here.
No, we're closing in a minute.
We're leaving in a minute. All right, here.
What do you want?
We'll have tea and cake.
Did you hear her? She said we'd closed. What do you want in here?
Cake and tea. What's it got to do with you?
I happen to be the proprietor. Now, will you leave?
Oh, good. I'm glad you're the proprietor. I was going to have a word with you anyway. We're doing a film up here, location, see? We might want to do a film in here.
You're drunk.
Just bring out the cake. Cake and fine wine.
If you don't leave, we'll call the police.
Balls! We want the finest wines available to humanity. We want them here and we want them now.
The police, Miss Brenner has it. We need to phone them.
Don't do that, Miss Blennerhassett. I'm warning you, Miss Blennerhassett. If you do, you're fired. We're multi-millionaires. We'll buy this place and fire you immediately. Yeah, that's right. We'll buy this place and install a fucking jukebox and liven you stiffs up a bit.